Hello, my name is Chris Gaynor, and today I will be discovering what big data is and how it's processed and defined as big data. Many companies today have one common problem, and that is processing big data. But there's four main things that we're going to be going over today. What big data is, of course, what are the attributes of big data, and why do we have big data? And then also we're going to be going into discovering some tools that people use to break down big data and resolve this issue. So first, big data. What is it? Data that is so large that it becomes difficult to process using traditional systems. So, for example, if you take a look at this picture I have, there's a very large disk trying to go into a computer. But that would be technically considered big data because it's so large that that computer can't process it. I know it's a little funny example, but that's the way I like to think of it. So also, what is big? I keep in mind when thinking about what big data is, the term big data is relative to the capabilities of the system it's being processed through. So you could have 100 megabytes of a picture, and it's being sent from a new iPhone 6s to an old Razr phone back when I was in 8th grade. And so you flip your phone open and it won't load because that data is too big, and that system can't process that 100 megabytes. So even though 100 megabytes isn't very big, it would be considered big data because that machine can't process it. So it's just whatever is too big for the system to process. So what are the pieces of big data? The three V's, which is velocity, volume, and variety. So velocity, volume, and variety, all three make up big data. And so first with velocity, the data comes in at a very high speed. So let's say you have a police speed radar and you are going up next to a train going 200 miles an hour, and you take the radar gun and shoot it at the train, and it can't take in that big data because the train's going too fast. So velocity is a very, very big aspect of big data because if something's going too fast, the processors can't keep up. But the same with volume. If back to the big disk going into the computer, it's too big, so the computer can't process it. So the data becomes too large, and then it will be considered big data as well. And then also with the variety, there's so many different varieties of data. Just some examples there are pictures, videos, books, transactions, and public records. These all combined would be considered, and separately would be considered, big data. So the variety of the big data is a big, or of data is a big attribute of big data. So where do we get this big data from? There's four main things that I want to talk about today. There's sources. These sources are users, applications, systems, and sensors. So users, people like us using Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, are creating new accounts every day because it's free and you can. Same with Gmail. People are creating new Gmail accounts every day, and there is being created more and more data. More emails are being sent, more pictures are being uploaded. So more and more data keeps building up and up. So these are a cause of big data. Also, applications like word processors, management systems, and flight simulators are a piece of big data. So let's say you download a document that you created on another computer, and it's 100+ pages with pictures, videos, and text. So you download it on a new computer and it opens up fine, but it may have taken a couple minutes just because it's so large and your computer had to process through it all. But let's say it didn't open. Then that document would be considered big data because it wasn't able to be opened on another computer. So word processors can create big data, as well as management systems and flight simulators. So these systems, like Mac OS, Microsoft, and any other operating system. I like to think of Spotify because that has a ton of data in it that's online, but you sort through on Spotify. And then we have sensors, so streetlights, microphones, and police radars. Back to the example with the high velocity or the high speed train that was too much for the radar to take in. So these sensors are constantly taking in data every day and adding to the big data problem. So how can we fix this problem though? There's tools that we have. So traditional systems and big data tools. So traditional systems are not big enough to handle big data. So like let's call the Razr flip phone a traditional system. It could not process that 100 megabytes of pictures or of that picture that you sent because it's a traditional system and it wasn't equipped to process all that data. And then there's not enough power in those traditional systems. So big data tools are used to create and handle big data. So sometimes it's not enough, but we have HADOP, which is a great tool that people have created and many companies have adopted to use today. So the system, HADOP, it cuts through big data and it processes the data. So let's remember the large disk going into the computer. If you cut up that disk, that's basically what HADOP is doing. It's cutting up the data and sorting it and processing it all. But sometimes, if that disk is just too big, it won't work. So I guess that would be considered extremely big data, but it's all considered big data because the size is relevant. So it doesn't always make it through, but this is the best system that one of the best systems that they have going on right now. So in conclusion today, we've learned that data is constantly growing. Big data is constantly growing. And there's no foolproof way of fixing it or processing it. And companies have accepted that, but they've also found other ways like HADOP to process the data. And keep in mind, big data isn't always big. It can be 100 megabytes going to an old Razr flip phone and still be considered big data because it couldn't be processed. But that is my interpretation today of big data and the problem that it has created. But thank you and have a great day.